Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
That's nice. So, thank you for coming. I mean, like, really, thank you for coming. I was so scared that no one was going to be here. I even invited my amazing mother-in-law and my amazing wife to fill the stands for me, just in case. They were sitting in the middle, and between my work wives and my wife and her mother, I don't know how I even would function. So, love the women in my life, so it's amazing. So, I'm super excited today, and I was worried that not many people would show up, which I'm fine with, because even if one person shows up, I'd be okay with that, because I just absolutely love talking about the subject of happiness and education. This is something that I've been really diving in deep to in the last 4 years, so much so that I'm currently writing a book on it. I'm almost done. I'm doing workshops, I'm doing presentations on it, and it's absolutely amazing when you have a passion and you get to share it with other people and people are receptive and listen to it. So I just really want to thank you for being here today, and I hope you enjoy this. And I'm going to get right into it. So I want to start off with an inquiry, because we all love a good inquiry in education. And this is actually the tree inquiry, and it stars my kids. That's Reed, he's 4 years old, and that's Lauren, who's 7 years old, and these kids are amazing. But let's get into this inquiry. So my neighbor plants a tree in her backyard, and it doesn't survive. So she's dragging the tree to the curb, and my kids walk up to her and say, "What happened to the tree?" Now, being a retired school teacher, she says to them, "I don't know. What do you think happened to the tree?" And so the inquiry began. So immediately they went and they looked at the tree and they noticed the leaves, and they were brown, dry, and brittle. And so they came up with their first hypothesis that the tree didn't survive because the leaves weren't healthy. Now, my neighbor said, those are very good observations, and the leaves are really, really important to the tree. However, that's not the reason this tree didn't survive. What else could it be? So they thought about it. My daughter said, well, where was the tree planted? So they ran into the backyard where the tree was planted, and they started to look at the environment that surrounded the tree, how much sun it was getting, how much shade it was getting. But it didn't take too long for my 4-year-old at that time to start playing in the dirt that surrounded the tree. And when he was playing in the dirt, he noticed something different. This dirt was entirely different from the dirt in our gardens. It was like thicker, stickier, more clay-like. So that led to a whole conversation on soil, and my neighbor explained that the soil is where the plants and trees get their nutrients and water from. And so my son says, well, how's that? And they started talking about the root systems and how the root systems work. And it's here that we actually discovered why that tree didn't survive. And there's a parallel in this education. So to get to this discovery, we had to look beyond the leaves, we had to dig a little deeper, and that's where we solved that this tree didn't survive because of the conditions it was planted in. And here's the parallel in education. You see, I believe in education we can get overly leaf focused. So what I mean by that is, just like the tree inquiries, we get focused on very specific things. So when we target those specific things with strategies, and we're trying to repair them all the time. And I think that has value, but I think sometimes in education we need to dig a little deeper. And just like in the inquiry, I think we need to get a little bit more root focused. And if we can get root focused and look beyond the leaves and get to the root of the issue, then we can make some significant changes that will be sustainable. So I'll give you some examples within education. So in Teachers College, think about what they talk to about, like what they were telling us in terms of classroom management. They would give us strategies. They'd say proximity, eye contact, priority seating. And those are strategies, and they will help you in that moment and maybe deal with that issue, but they're not going to solve the issue. What they really need to emphasize is the importance of relationships in classrooms. This is what we need to work on. We need to work on building these relationships. If we can create those positive relationships with students, it solves all of our different issues, not just that one specific instance. Here's another one. Think about what we do with testing in education. What do? We hand out a test, we look at the data, we find an area of need, and we just target with that with strategies. I think this has a lot of value, and I'm not dismissing it. I'm not dismissing its importance. However, I think we need to dig a little deeper and ask the big question. Why is this student not succeeding? What's going on? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it confidence? Is it mindset? And if we work on those, we're not just going to help them in that one area that they're struggling in. We're going to help them in all areas of academics and even areas of life if we can really be successful. Here's one. Think about teacher performance. We have a teacher that's really struggling. What do? We give them more and more and more strategies. Strategies are incredibly important, but is that really what's the most important thing? See, I truly believe the most important thing is to have teachers who love coming to work, are passionate about what they do, and are happy at work. And so there's so much research that backs this up. So we're going to look at some research from what happy employees look like, and we'll talk about that. So happy employees have 37% higher in sales. Now, when you think higher in sales and education, you guys are going in your heads to like Scholastic and Pizza Days. I asked you to convert that into student buy-in. Could you imagine you had 37% more student buy-in? What kind of impact are you going to have if that's the situation? The next one is 3 times more creative. Happy employees 3 times more creative. What if we tapped into that creativity? Think how amazing our lessons could be and how much fun students would have attending those lessons, and just as important, how much fun we would have delivering those lessons. Happy employees are 31% more productive. Think if we were 31% more productive, how much we could get done, and think of how that would impact our stress levels. And think of how that would open up space to give us that work-life balance that we always struggle to achieve. Here's another one. They're 10 times more engaged. Can you imagine being 10 times more engaged and sitting in professional development sessions and doing all those things? If we were fully engaged in what we're doing, think of the power that would have in transforming education and innovation. And the last one, happy employees are 19% more accurate in what they do. When I look at that for myself in education, I reflect, I think, what if I was 19% more accurate in my feedback and my assessment? How could I use that to improve that student's learning? And it's really interesting. The corporate world has been doing, skip them. The interesting part is this, is when we look at schools and we look at students, we're really student focused, which is great. I think we started with happiness, we got to shift that a little bit. We got to look at happy teachers, because those happy teachers, there's a trickle down to happy students. Can you imagine having a class that had 31% more productive, 19% more accurate, 10 times more engaged, and 3 times more creative? Think of the impact that would have on students, and think how that would change students' perception and students' feeling when they go to school. You see, the corporate world has been doing this for a long time. 2 decades ago, they created a role called the Chief Happiness Officer, the CHO. Currently, there's 1,000 of these on LinkedIn, I think, so it's still current, it's still going on. And this is a high-ranking position in a company that only looks at employee happiness, and it's so important. This is the most probably well-known, Chade Meng Tan. He was Google's happiness officer in the early 2000s, and Google truly believed that if we really want to have a successful business, it starts with having happy employees. That's what they believe, and look how successful they become. That's the exact same thing in education. If we really want to have a successful education system, if we really want to have a system where students are thriving and growing, it starts with having educators that are passionate and love coming to work every day. Now, I'm going to show you a little video here of one of my best friends in education, and he's a truly inspiring guy. But he does a really nice job in this video talking about the idea of creating this climate, creating this atmosphere in his classroom. And I want to watch this video and we'll talk about it after. So check it out, it's really inspiring. Keep an eye in the corner, there's going to be a kid coming up. Watch this one kid, I'll point a button to him.
Build inside the kids a love for learning. It starts out with creating that community. I call my kids, we're a family, we're the 3M family, and they find this place to be a safe environment, and we work together that way. My goal in them is for them to want to break down the door from the school every day, for them to be begging their parents that they want to go to school, because that creates such a fun and engaging environment for them. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel like they are able to affect change in the world.
He does just such a great job there of describing that, what he's trying to create in that classroom. And you think of this classroom, I know students in this classroom, and they get really upset on snow days when they can't come. They really want to be there that bad. It's super inspiring. And, I think of that in terms of what if we had that in terms of a school culture, in terms of an educational culture, where everyone wants to be there, no one dreads going. There's nothing worse than having students that dread going to school, and there's also nothing worse than having actual teachers who dread going to school. And this is what Happy Schools is about. It's about trying to create that culture that people wake up in the morning and say, yeah, let's do this. Let's go somewhere where I'm going to be engaged and I'm going to make an impact and do all these great things. It's really important. Now, Lee and I talk all the time, and one thing about Lee is he's super why focused. So Lee's why is that he wants every student to love education. And that why drives everything he does. It drives how he does it and what he does. And Simon Sinek has a TED Talk called Start With Your Why, and it's easily, I think it's the third most viewed TED Talk of all time. If you haven't seen it, it's a really great TED Talk to watch. And he really talks about how important it is to start with that why. And when I've watched that video for years, and I never really got one part of it that I want to share with you, and I want to share why I think it's really important. So I'll show you the last little bit of the TED Talk, and then we'll talk about why this is super important in education.
Because there are people who are those who leaders hold a position of power or authority. But those who lead inspire. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead, not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead, not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them, or find others to inspire them. Thank you very much.
I don't really know how I missed this part, but when I read the book Start With Your Why, I didn't really, I thought of it more when I saw the video more of like, I need to find my why, and it's going to change how I do things. I never looked at it as like how that why is important for inspiration and how that why is important for leadership. It's not about the individual, it's about the group. And I want to be very clear on something right now. I say those who lead inspire when he says that. When we think of the word leadership, and when we think of leaders from this point on in this conversation, I don't want you to think of administration alone. I think everyone in education has the ability to lead, and I think it's super important that we all step up and try and fulfill that if we really want what's best for kids. I love this cartoon right here. In the cartoon it says, who wants change? And everyone's hand goes up. Then it says, who wants to change? And all the hands go down. Then it says, who wants to lead the change? And it's clear room, right? That's not acceptable in education. That's not acceptable if everyone says we want to do what's best for kids. That's not acceptable. What needs to happen is we need to inspire people to want to change. We got to get those hands back up in the air. And even that's not enough. We have to empower people to want to lead that change. We need more leaders in education. And when I'm saying leaders, I'm saying in your classroom with your students, you're a leader. You can be a leader on staff. You can be a leader as an administrator. You can be a leader board-wide. You can be a leader because you are inspirational in all different forms of social media. You can be leaders in so many different ways. And I'm a big Gandhi fan, and that quote of be the change you want to see in the world, we need to start being the change we want to see in education. And I'm super optimistic about this because I have this theory, and this is a true belief, because I think great leaders do what great teachers do. If you think in your head right now what a great teacher does, and you'll come up with things like they're compassionate, they can form relationships with people, they give timely and relevant feedback, they get scaffold learning, they're empathetic, and you would come up with all these great things. And then if I said you make a list of what a great leader does, it would be very similar. So we in education need to see and feel that we are leaders, and we got to step up to create the culture we want in education, not wait for an administrator to come into our buildings and change the culture, or not wait for our board to take a certain angle and change the culture. We got to get in there and start leading right away. One of my favorite authors is Sean Achor, and he's really the guy that got me thinking about happiness in education. And what he says is in this book, Happy Advantage, he says, we need to start everything with happiness. And we need to use that happiness to fuel what it is we do and how we do it. And then from there, that will lead to success. But he's got another really good book called Big Potential, and I absolutely love the beginning. So what he talks about was there's these biologists floating down this river through a jungle in China. And they look up and there's these mangrove trees, and all of a sudden it explodes in light. Like I'm talking like, it looks like lightning bolt shot out of it. And a couple seconds later it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again. Now it starts going all the way down the riverside, and they're confused. They don't know what it is. Turns out it's fireflies. So fireflies have the ability to synchronize their flashing with each other. Why they do this is because it increases their chance of reproduction by up to 86%, the light that's emitted, and it attracts more fireflies to it. So what Sean Acor talks about in this is it's not enough to have a few bright lights flashing here and there. We can't wait for a leader, or we can't wait for one person in school to come in and do it. The only way to achieve our big potential or our true potential in education is if we synchronize and we all start working together and we work on building that culture we want, and it's not just put on certain people. Now, a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, this was my class, and I feel like this class, we came the biggest to reaching our big potential as a class. And I want to tell you this story, and it's kind of embarrassing, but I'll give it to you. You put so much time getting your classroom the way you want it for that first day of school. So you guys probably all been in that situation where you step back and you're looking at all the empty desks, and it's looking great, right? I was doing this year, and I thought was going through, I kept thinking this thought, and then all of a sudden my students start coming in, and I'm like, oh geez, and I don't know if you know me, I just kind of speak, and sometimes I don't think about what I'm going to do, so I get up to the front of the class, and I want to explain this thought to them. It's like the first thing I say. So I said, guys, I had this crazy realization that all those empty desks that were empty 5 minutes ago, they're going to be filled with students I love by the end of the year. The embarrassing part is I couldn't get love out because I was bawling my face off. And I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. And I just want you to think about what a 13-year-old kid sees their 250-pound grade 8 teacher bawling and confessing his love in the first 2 minutes of the school year. So, clean myself up, able to get through it. So then I get up and I say, I got to explain this to you. I got to explain what I was thinking. What I was thinking in that moment before they came in was that I've loved every student I've ever taught. Like, I don't sleep because of them. I worry about them. I celebrate with them. I absolutely love them. And I've had this realization that why would I wait to the end of the year to figure that out and understand that? So what I went on to explain to them is this, is that everything I do from that moment on is because I love you. If I'm hard on you, if I push you, if I make you do things you don't want to do, it's simply because I love you and I believe you and I want what's best for you. And it was so interesting that this set off something that I could never have predicted. So at the same time, I had a penalty box system. So it sounds a little worse than it is, not really that bad. So what it was students would get penalties if they did something inappropriate and disrespectful. But the power of the system was I created it so that when a student got a penalty, everyone worked together to support that student. And it was an incredible team building. So fast forward 39 weeks, 0 penalties. There's a grade 8 class, 30 kids, not one student was inappropriate or disrespectful. Supply teachers, custodians, no snowball throwing, no office visits, not one time did it happen. And when I look at why that is, and when I sat back and said, why is that year so important? It reminds me of this quote Simon Sinek says. He says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think that was the first year the students ever really understood why I was doing what I was doing. And so it's very interesting when you look at that. So what happened after that was they started to believe it. They started to believe in themselves, started to believe in each other, they started to care for each other, they started to love each other. And it was so interesting watching this happen. And here's the most interesting part for me is it was a really fun year, but it was easily the most academic growth I've ever had in a class I've taught. And it all stemmed back from them knowing the why of what we were doing and how powerful that was. And it was that synchronization of everyone joining in and working collaboratively as a team that made it so special. So on the topic of Simon Sinek, this is my absolute favorite Simon Sinek's clip or anything he's done. And I want to show it to you, and I want to explain to you why I believe that this is so needed in education.
If you were to go to the gym, right? It's not exercise, right? If you go to the gym and you work out and you come back and you look in the mirror, you will see nothing. And if you go to the gym the next day and you come back and you look in the mirror, you will see nothing, right? So clearly there's no results. Trying to measure, it must not be effective. So we quit, right? if you fundamentally believe that this is the right course of action and stick with it, like in a relationship, I bought her flowers and I wish her happy birthday, and she doesn't love me. Clearly, I don't love it. You know, that's not what happens. If you believe there's something there, you commit yourself to an act of service. You commit yourself to the regime, the exercise. You can screw it up. You can eat chocolate cake one day, you can skip a day or two. You know, they don't ask for that. But if you stick with it consistently, I'm not exactly sure what day, but I know you'll start getting into shape. I know. And the same with the relationship. It's not about the events. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. Right? You go to the dentist twice a year, your teeth will fall out. You have to brush your teeth every day for 2 minutes. What does brushing your teeth twice a day for 2 minutes do? Nothing. Unless you do it every day, twice a day for 2 minutes. Right? It's the consistency. Going to the gym for 9 hours does not get you into shape. Working out every day for 20 minutes gets you into shape. So the problem is we treat leadership with intensity. We have a 2-day offsite, we invite a bunch of speakers, we give everybody a certificate, you're a leader, right? Those things are like going to the dentist. They're very important, they're good for reminding us, and getting us back on track, and learning new lessons, but it's the daily practice of all the monotonous, little, boring things like brushing your teeth that matter the most.
See, this idea of it's not about events, it's not about intensity, it's about consistency is so important. And we're also guilty of it because, and we all do it, I think my whole grade 8 teaching career was about this. But now when I watch this, it makes me think of the idea of like, you know, when we're trying to do something major, like shift a culture or create a better culture for student learning, this isn't what you're going to do in the beginning of the first staff meeting and it's going to last you the whole year. If we're going to team build, it's not something that's just going to be some event and we're not going to touch it again. I'll give you a very good example from a classroom. So this is one of my best friends and mentor in education. Her name is Melissa McKinney-Lett. And it's so interesting. I was in her room a couple years ago, and she had a lot of growth mindset, anchor charts everywhere. And I was like, oh, you're doing a lot with growth mindset. She goes, yeah, like a ton. And I was like, so how's it going? What'd you figure out? And she goes, I realized something. It's not just about showing the video and explaining to kids what growth mindset is and doing like a one-off activity. She's like, if you want to have any impact with this, you gotta do it every day. And she's like, we live it in this classroom. And just as she says this little boy walks in. He was transferred from another board, had a huge behavioral IEP, and he looks at her and he walks by and he goes, Miss ML, my mind is a muscle. And then he sits down and she smiles at me and says, see, we live it. We live it every day. And at the end of that year, I talked to her and I said, how'd the year go? And she goes, you know what? I did it every day and I'm starting to see a change in these students' mindset. So then I said to her, I was super excited for this year. I was like, well, what are you doing this year? And she's like, still doing growth mindset, obviously. But she's like, I've added a couple pieces. And then I felt really silly when I said this because I said, what are you doing? I said, one word. And I said, oh, I saw that on Twitter. Like, you put your one word and color around it. She's like, no, a little bit more intense than that. And she goes, again, you got to build it out. So she puts this tweet out, probably because I said that, and it says, creating your one word is easy. Living your one word is a challenge. It's so important to revisit and model this daily. And that's what they do in this class. Every single day, she weaves it through everything. Here's an example. They have class agreements. And every day, they walk out in the hallway and they read this class agreement. It says, we can be our best selves by thinking about our personality traits and how we would like to see, we like others to see us and how we would like to see ourselves. Then what they do is they shift their eyes down and they have these posters of themselves and they have a word on it. They focus on their word and then they walk in the classroom. Once they walk into the classroom, their management system's based on this, their feedback is based on this, and they work on it all the time. And for those who know McKinney, she's a really modest person. She called me up a couple months ago and said, Ruff, you will not believe the change in this class. It is crazy. And it's because she's doing it all the time. It's because she's attacking with intensity. You see, we really got to be careful, like whether it be in a classroom setting, whether it be in a board setting, whether it be in a school setting, that we do events. And so we create a mission statement, or we create a word, or a slogan for our school, and then that's it. And it may pop up once in a while. It's not going to have any impact. It's not a great investment in our energy and our time. When we do stuff like that, if it's that important, we need to make it consistent and we need to put it into everything we do if we want it to really have value. So one thing I've been reading a lot about, and I find it very interesting, is this World Happiness Report. So they actually have a report that rates countries from the happiest country in the world to the least happy country in the world. So I thought I'd go through just some background on this. So in 2018, Finland was the happiest country in the world. Canada was the 7th happiest country in the world, so yay for us, a pretty great place to live. And out of 156 countries. And every year they focus on something different. So in 2018 they focused on immigration. And what they found was if you left a country that was low on the happiness index and went to a country that was high on the happiness index, there was an automatic increase in happiness. Automatic. And we see this in education all the time. We see teachers, they're at a school that's really struggling with culture, or it's really toxic, and they move to a school that has a great climate and culture, and all of a sudden they're rejuvenated, they love learning again, they love teaching again, they want to grow again. We see this all the time in education. And it just speaks to the importance of the climate of that school and the leadership that's happening within that school. And when they do the happiness report, they look at 6 different factors. And I want to go through these 6 different factors and talk about how they relate to what we're seeing in education and what we can do in education. Now, the first factor they talk about is gross domestic product and money. There's a real interesting relationship between money and happiness. And it goes like this in real layman's terms. It says, money helps you be happy up to a certain point, and then after that, there's no significant change in overall happiness. The dollar amount, they say, $75,000 a year income. Beyond that, money's not really helping you. And this study kind of reflects that. Check out this stat. United States, when they were studying this, went up $1.27 trillion in their GDP. However, they dropped 4 spots on the World Happiness Index. And I read up on this and I was trying to figure out how does that happen? And that's just counterintuitive to what you would think. You know what I got? Confidence in leadership. Think of that. Donald Trump's going to pop up in your head in a couple seconds, right? That leadership outweighs $1.27 trillion of economic growth. Think how important that is, and because it changes the culture, right? And we really need to work on that. And with regards to money, the co-editor of this report, John Hellawell, says money is only really important up to a certain point, but we don't really focus on that. What we focus on is these other characteristics. So here they are. And the first one's healthy life expectancy. Now note that doesn't say life expectancy. Life expectancy is how long you live. Healthy life expectancy is how long you live and enjoy it, right? And let's transfer that into the idea of teacher longevity. How long do you teach and enjoy it? It's not how long you teach. It's how can you get to the end, the 30-year mark or the 35-year mark or wherever you're going for, and still walk in a building and love it, and still feel inspired. See, that's what we want to create in education. That should be the end goal. Think of the power of that. If you've got all these teachers in their last 5 years with all that experience who are still loving their jobs, think of the trickle-down effect that's going to have in education. And here's another one for you. When we look at health, we don't always factor in happiness, right? The Dalai Lama said that happiness is the highest form of health. We need to put these two in a package together because there's so much benefits to that. Look at the benefits of happiness on your health. Let's pull a couple up. It acts as an antidote for stress. Teachers are stressed out right now. We need this. Look at the next one. It says improves immune systems and fights off illness. We just went through flu season. We need stuff like this. But the big one is this, resilience. It's the ability to bounce back. If we can create that happier culture, when bad things happen and bad things do happen and bad things are happening right now, it's the ability to bounce back. I want to show you a video by his name is Ed Diener, he's a psychologist, where he kind of talks about resiliency, but then he goes into this relationship between happiness and health. idea of like, in schools we'll have like healthy schools committees or whatever we're gonna do, but really when you look at them, they're always really student focused, right? We're always focusing on the students, and I think that's great, but I don't think that's even close to the answer. We need to expand that and say, we need to focus on every single person in that building. We look at caretakers, support staff, teachers, administrators, every single person, we need to create that. And here's why it's so important. If you really look at teachers' health in general, think about it. We're having more sick days, more stress leave, more teachers than ever drop out in the first 5 years. And not only that, look at our students. They're struggling really hard with mental health issues. And one thing we really got to realize as a system is, how do you expect teachers who are struggling with well-being issues and mental health issues to support students that are struggling with the same thing? It just doesn't work that way. We need to have teachers who have the skills and are in the right space and work in the right environment that pulls everyone together if we want to be resilient and we want to come together and solve it. It's super important that we focus on teacher happiness and we allow that to impact our students. So the next one is freedom, and it's actually freedom to make life choices. And this one's really, in education, it ties into the idea of autonomy. And when you look at it, look at Finland, for example. Finland finished #1 on the happiness index, and many people will argue that they have the best education system in the world. And when they argue that, what they're saying is things like this. They attend school the least number of hours per week or something like that. They have high standardized tests, one of the high standardized test scores. They have one of the best work-life balances. And not only that, the students and teachers love coming to school. I watched an interview with the Finnish teacher, and she says, teachers in Finland are living the American dream. How ironic is that, right? And so when we look at that, I was like, well, I got to look into this and figure out like this Finland, what's going on in this system. And it was so interesting that autonomy keeps popping up. But it's not just autonomy. I want to show you something very interesting. I pulled this quote out, and I think it's super powerful. It says, teachers' perceived autonomy can be seen to correlate positively with perceived self-efficacy, work satisfaction, empowerment, and positive work climate. You know what's super interesting about this? Is it's not autonomy. It's perceived. It's the idea that we feel like we have freedom. It's the idea that we feel like we make choices. It's not that it's not going to work if it's just go, hey teachers, go do whatever you want. Here's a curriculum example for you. When the grade 7-8 curriculum transferred over to history and geography, I was like an in-school coach, and I found that when that happened, it could either go really good or really bad. So what I mean by that is if you just get full-blown autonomy and it looked like this. In geography, you're going to create a different country in the world. Go, I'll see you in 4 months. Tons of autonomy, that's all autonomy, flop. But if you took a pedagogical approach and you really cared and you set that up, you would have an overarching question and you would scaffold that learning and you would build in safety nets. And within those confined, students would be making choices and driving that project where it was going to go. And you would just be making sure that it was going in the right direction and you'd be helping them. See, that's what we need in education from leadership is we need perceived autonomy. We need to feel that we have all this autonomy, but there's also, it just doesn't work unless there's that structure, unless there's that scaffolding, unless there's that safety net built into it, and unless someone's guiding us so we're working and synchronizing together. That idea is so important. And when we think of, well, how do you give freedom and autonomy in education, I love the book Professional Capital because they talk about the idea of push, pull, and nudge. And this is how we can get creative as leadership. And remember, leadership is, you could use this in your classroom, it's just not school-wide. And they say that great leaders know when to push and when to pull. There's times where you have to push. There's times where stuff has to get done and it has to be in a certain way. I totally get that. But the real great inspirational leaders understand the idea of how to create a pull. I'll give you an example in our board. So in our board, 4 years ago, we weren't using D2L that much. We had 300 elementary users in D2L. And so we sat down as a team and we said, well, what are we gonna do? And I would meet with principals and they would say like, everyone should do it. And I'd be like, I would be all on board. Let's mandate this thing. Every teacher will love it. Every teacher can use it. It's got so many tools. And I believe that with my heart. So we would go into schools and we would mandate it, and it was dismal at best. People were dragging their feet, didn't want to use it. You know, even when they used it, it was like it wasn't even that well, and it was just, it was, so we did it again at another school, same deal, and then we went back and we said, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work at all. So what are we going to do? Well, let's try and get people excited. Let's pull them to use it. So what do? Let's go into a staff meeting and we'll inspire them. We'll show them all the great things it can do. We'll get people pumped up. And so all of a sudden, it happens. Teachers start using preps, lunches, breaks, after-school workshops, watching video tutorials. They're all in. Eventually, we received the D2L Award of Excellence, and we were onboarding 5,000 people a year into this program voluntarily. In elementary alone, we went from 300 to 17,000 in a short period of time. So people are asking, like, how are you doing this? And what they want is they want a formula. And the formula is make a pull factor. Get people to want to use it. Get people to choose to use it. And then the quality of usage will be great. Your retention will be great. It's pulling people into what you're going to do. Now, the idea of nudge is, like, I think on another level, when we start playing with this one in terms of our creativity, because it's so important, it's so kind of a cool way to lead. And I'll give you an example. So in the book, Blue Zones of Happiness by Dan Buettner, he looks at the 6 blue zones, which are the happiest, healthiest places in the world with the highest lifelong expectancy, right? And these communities are so interesting to look at because they have all these nudges built into them. So even the way the city's physically designed in terms of the housing promotes more socialization and nudges people to socialize. The way the transportation system's set up nudges people to walk more to work and to take bikes more to work. And it's insane, and you think, well, maybe it's just a fluke. Dan Buettner, that author, has put it in 42 countries across the states right now, and it's insane the results he's getting by just nudging people into making happier and healthier decisions. So I pulled up an example of what this could look like in education. This is at my daughter's school. I saw this post on Twitter, and they created a gratitude station called Dis-moi. They're a French immersion school. And this gratitude station is just a table with letters, envelopes, markers, paper, and it just sits there, and every tool a kid will need to partake in gratitude sits there. Nobody tells them what to do. Nobody asks them to do it. People walk by, community members walk by, kids walk by, teachers walk by, and this is a way to nudge people into practicing gratitude, which is highly tied to happiness. So you think of, like, how can we be creative in the classroom? How can we be creative in our school setting to nudge people into finding more happiness? Now, the next one is trust. And trust ties into autonomy, right? Because when you trust someone, if you trust the teacher, what you're saying is, I believe you can do it. I believe in your skills. I believe in your decision-making process. I believe in your commitment. I believe in all these things. So, and we as leaders, whether it's with students or whether it's with staff, got to understand that to get trust, you got to give trust, basically. And trust is tied to happiness. In the happiness report, they ask for this question. It says, do you believe that you can trust most people? So in an area like the United States where it's got a declining happiness, they say that 33% of people answer yes to they believe they can trust most people. In Denmark, one of the top 3 always, 75% say that they can trust most people. And we got to understand that this relationship with trust, we're getting to the undercurrent of how happiness happens in schools and systems, right? And there's things that we need to do to build trust. Here they are right here. Number 1, transparency. People need to feel like they're the conversations that they're supposed to be in. People can't feel like there's stuff going on behind their backs, especially with leadership. It really breaks things apart. And this idea of transparency always comes up when I run happiness workshop with teachers. And you know what they always say to me? When the door is closed in the office, it builds anxiety and distrust in buildings that don't have trust built into it. And the reason why is because teachers start writing their own stories, and it becomes a wedge in that school. So it's so interesting that teachers pick up on these things. The next one is the idea of authenticity and vulnerability. For you to trust someone, you really need to believe that they're going to be there for you, that they care about you, that they want what's best for you. If you don't believe that, then it's hard to trust that person. And in order to do that as a leader, again, as a teacher, an administrator, wherever, you have to drop some armor. You got to take off some of that armor and be a little vulnerable and not be that powerful leader all the time and be that soft spot for people to land. And the next one is consistency, and I like to tie this one into vulnerability right now because I'm just reading Dare to Lead, and a couple days ago I read it, and Brene Brown was talking about this idea of like a marble jar, if you read it, where basically her daughter, they have a marble jar in the classroom, everyone gets marbles when they're good or whatever, and this jar builds up. She ends up equating that to the idea of that's what trust is like. It's like filling that jar. It takes time, it takes consistency. You got to keep filling it. If you take marbles out of it, you got to figure out how to get those marbles back into it. I thought it was a great way to just describe it. And the other thing is equity. So equity is the idea of supporting every person the way they need to be supported, not just supporting everyone the same way. But one thing that students have taught me about the idea of equity, and I would always, students would say, like, I don't like this teacher, and I'd say, like, why don't you like him? You know what always came up? Favoritism. Almost every time. So favoritism is a wedge. Favoritism is a staff killer. So I get that you like people more, you have more in common with people, but the minute you go down that route of favorites, you turn your school into Games of Thrones. Right? Kyle's really happy I made a Games of Thrones. And why is this really important, right? Is because this all leads into safety. And safety is directly tied to happiness. And if you read Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, it's all about this circle of safety they're trying to create, how that impacts trust and how that impacts culture. Right? And so here's another example is in Singapore was one of the happiest countries in the entire world for years, and especially in Asia. It was the happiest country in Asia for years. And when you look at why, their government made sure that every single person had a roof over their head and food in their mouth. They took care of that for every single person, and it made that country feel safe, and they soared on the happiness index. That idea of building safety into education is really important. I'm going to show you a really cool video right now, and I'm going to talk to you about why safety is so important based off this video. Enjoy it, it's a good one.
I had a lot of memories when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me though was when I was about 10 years old, and I was in school, and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and I would just start tapping. And the students in the classroom would look at me and say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they said, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, when we go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." So I did. I went back to class and I felt myself starting to tap. I did this, I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class and the teacher, Mr. Jensen, looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person who believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me. And I will never forget it. So I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and Wendy Lash. And he walked past me, he sat next to his desk, and he said, "Come here, I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "No, I need you to know something about trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and said, "Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." From that moment on, I've never put a six down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because
any video that shows the impact that an educator can have on one student. But what we really need to realize in education is the impact is way beyond this one student in that classroom. This is an idea that was brought to me by a student a long time ago. We were having a really good year, and I was having a conversation with her, and I said, "How do you think the year's going?" She says, "It's amazing, it's awesome." And I said, "Why is it awesome?" And she says, "Because we feel safe." And I'm like, "What? Like, that's not what you expect from a 13-year-old. And I was like, "Well, why do you feel safe?" And listen to this answer a 13-year-old gives me. She goes, "It's the way you treat Max. It's what you're willing to do for him that lets us all know that you will be there for us." And this is the idea in education that we really got to get our heads around, is we need to support the people who need it the most because it impacts everyone. It makes everyone feel safe. We need to look at those people, as hard as it may be, and try our best to support that, because it's not just that one student. It's everybody in that room. It's everybody in that school. It's everybody in that entire organization that is feeling that, right? It's a really important idea to get our heads around. The next one is generosity, and that's basically the willingness to give help or support. And when we think of generosity, we often think of money. But generosity needs to be thought of so differently in terms of generous with money, generous with time, generous with gratitude, generous with recognition, generous with all these things that we can bring to people. And they use money all the time because it's easy in positive psychology. They have studies where they give a group of people $20 and go buy yourself something. Then they give another group of people $20 and go buy someone else something. That group that buys themselves something, zero change in happiness. That group that buys other people, an explosion in their happiness. And there's a reason for that. That an act of kindness has the most acute effect on your happiness in the moment. It has the most powerful effect on your happiness in that moment. And we need to build this in more to education with consistency. Here is one of my favorite posters of all time. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it says, "Make generosity part of your growth strategy." When we're looking at building a school, when we're looking at building a classroom, when we're looking at building that and building that culture, we need to start thinking about things like happiness, gratitude, all these things. We need to kindness. We need to build a school around that. And when I think of a way we can start with that, it's this. I think if we come together for something meaningful. So whether it's a student that's struggling, whether it's a family that's struggling, whether it's an organization, rallying around that, whether it be with your class, whether it be with your staff, whether it be with your board, whatever it is, it brings you together with something that's really meaningful and purposeful. And think of what this is doing with regards to happiness. A, you're getting that act of kindness, happiness going all the time. But then, what's the other thing? You're synchronizing. You're socializing. You're working together. And it's becoming really, really powerful if we can do that. So looking for those opportunities to build teams to do some great stuff in the world, I think that's something we should really be investing more in education. And think of what that teaches our kids. Now, I have this belief that I think we need to be more generous with our recognition in education. This is a real solid belief I have, is that, and I don't want you to think what I'm saying is administration to teacher. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking teacher to teacher, teacher to student, student to teacher, communities to school. I think we do not have enough recognition in education, and I think it's really tough on teachers and really tough on everyone in that building. And the reason why is teaching is emotionally exhausting. And it's busy all the time, and you're working so hard that you feel like nobody sees what you do. Because we're all so busy. And we don't stop and let other people know what they're doing. Sometimes we rely on leaders to say, well, why aren't they recognizing people? Well, why aren't you recognizing? I think we need to own that one a little bit more as educators, and I think we need to promote that, and we'll just see our students do it. So I have this thing I created for myself years ago, and it's called Random Acts of Recognition. And if I was to give you one thing to put into your daily habits and routines, this would maybe be my top. And what this is the idea of this. If you have an authentic thought about someone, react on it as quickly as possible and as simple as possible. The problem is we try to make it too complex. So, for instance, if 3 weeks from now, I'm sitting on my couch at home and a conversation I have with an inspiring speaker at Connect goes through my head, I pick up my phone, I shoot him a tweet, I email them, I text them. Or if I'm walking by a teacher's room and I see something awesome going on, I pick up a piece of paper in that moment and I stick it on the door. This will have an incredible impact, not only on the people you currently love and care about. It is essential to building strong PLNs and growing your support network. Try it. Try it for 1 week. Every time you have an authentic thought, just react on it. If you're thinking of someone right now that you think is inspiring, send them a text right now and watch the impact that's going to have. A, your happiness is going to be affected, their happiness is going to be affected, and your relationship will grow. It is an absolute game changer. Now here's the final thing they look at. They look at social support. And when you look at the happiness research, the most powerful stuff comes from the idea of relationships and happiness. They have studies that they look at the top 10% of happy people in the study. Only one thing ties them all together: strength of social relationships. They have another study, longest ongoing study on wellness right now, 83 years plus or something going, and they've only come up with one conclusive phrase: relationships keep us happier and healthier, and then they write period in letters at the end because it's so conclusive. This is so important to what we do. When we think social support, we need it to be the perception that everyone's cared for, that there's help available if needed, and that we're a part of a social network. And we need to try to get everybody in. We can't have outliers. We can't have wedges where people aren't a part of this social network. It just wrecks everything. We need to work on creating these systems. And the reason why this is absolutely essential in education has to do with when something goes wrong, it's happiness that is going to help us. And I want to show you this little video by John Hellewell. He's the co-director of the Happiness Report. And watch what he says about this topic.
In a high social capital region, a disaster happens. Everybody comes together and works together in order to put things right again. But the happy countries, the ones that don't play the blame game, they say, okay, this is a problem, let's see what we can do, all of us.
See, in tough times, it's the fact we're happiness and we have these social supports that bring us together. You know, I was super proud of Ontario teachers a couple weeks ago when they stepped on 30,000 people and came together. That's what happy cultures do. We're one of the 7 top nations in happiness because we come together and we work together and we fight together for our kids. If we lose that, it's not going to happen. And I'm gonna show you what I think in terms of social capital. And just it's the idea of that support building it. And just a couple books that really solidify this in my head is that Start With Your Why. It's so important that we have that strong why so we can inspire people. Professional Capital talks about the idea of to raise human capital, which is our individual skill. It's essential that we have social capital. We have that community built. And not only that, Professional Capital talks a lot about the idea of who are we drawing into this profession. So if we perceive teachers as burnt out, wanting to quit and hating their jobs, what kind of teachers are we going to have in future generations? What are our students looking at thinking? You know, and then when you look to the book Big Potential, think of the light that those fireflies synchronizing together gives off, and think of what that's bringing in. We need to worry about the future of education. We need to create a profession that is seen as being an awesome, fulfilling, amazing career, because that's what's going to solidify that we have great teachers in the future. And this is not easy. Like when we're trying to create this, this is not fluffy, this is not easy. But if we start with a really strong why, and we all synchronize around that why, and we attack it with consistency and we make it a priority, we can achieve happy schools. It's totally possible, and it happens in all of our districts. And going right back to the beginning and going back to the inquiry we talked about, if we really want to achieve our potential in education, we need to create the conditions necessary for it to grow and flourish and sustain. This is absolutely important. And a couple other things that I want to say is that your students deserve this. Every student that comes into your classroom deserves to come to school and want to come to school and enjoy coming to school, and they deserve a teacher at the front of the room that really wants to be there, that appreciates being there, that loves being there. And I also want to say this. You deserve it. You guys have one of the toughest jobs. It's so draining and there's so much to it and it's so complex. and you work so hard, and I see so many teachers, so I see how hard you work. You deserve to wake up every day feeling, I love my job and I love going to work. You deserve to retire and look back on 30 years education and think, man, that was awesome. And I think this is crucially important. Now, when I go to work, first of all, I should say this. I want to thank you for coming, because I was worried no one was coming, so it was nice that you're coming. But before I go, I want to give you two things, because whenever I go to something, I always want takeaways. I always want to leave here thinking, what can I do with this? And so I don't have much time for it, but I'll give you these two. We talked about random extra recognition. I challenge you to do one of these or both of these for a week and see what happens. The other one that you could try, which I think is super powerful, it's in competition with this one in my head for like the greatest one, is the idea of this app called Happy Feet. It's a gratitude app. Every night I wake up, every time at 10:10 every night, I get a notification, and it's changing the way I see things. On horrible days, it makes me do this. And it changes my perception of when things are bad. It just forces me to look at things that are good. It's a really powerful app, and probably one of my favorite things. I've been doing it now for 102 days straight now, and I have no interest in ever stop using this app because I think it's really powerful. So I appreciate it. I think I went over a little over time. You guys were awesome. I have Connect t-shirts if someone wants one. Don't know, I'll run down here. I only got like 20. But if you want a Connect t-shirt, come see me. If you want to talk about happiness and education, I'd love to talk to you. Have a great day, guys. Safe travels.